Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Quick Connect. This is our third session and about the topic of quality conversations. And I think if you caught the last two ones, we were actually talking about assumptions, meaning clarifying assumptions as well as stating your assumptions. And today, the topic for us today is on jargons versus storytelling. And this is really important in conversations, especially during this period of time, because context is very hard to come by because we're communicating through digital media, whether is it through video chats, um, phone calls, or even just text. That makes it really hard to understand context. And if you don't know the jargons, you need to storytell to get people to understand a little bit more about what you know. And I think with that, I can get Alex to actually chime in a little bit on some of the things that he has thoughts on for this topic as well.
So one of the things that, as we start talking about jargons and storytelling is this: jargons become very effective when everybody understands the same jargon. So for example, if we're all on the same agile team and we're all using agile, it becomes very familiar. Or if all of us are familiar with strengths, right? Then if I start talking about strengths, overuse, underuse, what's the strengths, what's the weakness, the definition of things, this can become like jargons. And without people understanding what these terms are, it becomes confusing. So for example, when we talk about a talent theme now, right, for Clifton Strengths, and we talk about responsibility, right? So there is a jargon for Clifton Strengths talent team for the word responsibility, whereby it talks about people who have psychological ownership over their words and their promises versus what the dictionary definition of responsibility is. So if I went to a job interview, we have this in another video, or going to do it, that we go to someone and say, hey, my talent is responsibility, or I don't have the responsibility talent. It actually does a disservice to you by using these jargons, because the person has no context whatsoever to understand what the terms mean. Yeah. So it's very important to then know whether or not it's appropriate to use these jargons, especially if the person may not even recognize it's a jargon, like when you talk about Clifton Strengths talent teams.
Like the word love, right? Love can be a jargon. It can be a jargon because I love you, bro, is very different from I love you. I love this. They're all different jargons. And if you look at it, the difference between jargon and if you don't know what jargon means, jargon is typically a technical language that is unique to a profession. But another way of looking at it that we're trying to talk about is your version of definition of that word.
Just to do it. So when someone starts throwing jargon, it's kind of like don't understand what the person was talking about, and therefore it's very important to know what your audience is, what their experience is, and whether or not using of jargon is appropriate, because just abbreviations that we all love to do can cause more problems in communication. Especially if, say again?
No, this is perfect. This is exactly what you're supposed to talk about anyway. You're supposed to talk about knowing your audience, right?
Yeah, so. Exactly.
Yeah, so now, yeah, you can go further. And if your audience includes women in these scenarios who have never been through army or NS, it is completely irresponsible of you to use jargon at this time, right?
Yeah. So it's also about responsibility, like you say.
There's a jargon there. Okay.
How then do we translate from jargon to layman?
So I was trying to teach a few guys all the while back. So a lot of guys that I've met had difficulty relating to women in general because their lives revolved around gaming and all this kind of stuff. So the conversation topics that we like to talk about people, talents, all these kind of things are things that, relatable to anybody.
Right.
But if you're a gamer and most girls don't game, most ladies don't game, and your topic of choice with guys is NS. How do you translate this into something that's relatable for another person? So, so this is where it's really interesting, right? So, again, we go back to setting assumptions and clarifying assumptions. A lot of reasons why jargons don't work is because the assumptions are deleted and distorted, right? The whole bunch of things that are gonna be discussed, the context was given by the experience, not by the explanation. So if you've never experienced it before, how are you supposed to understand it? So recognizing that and knowing your audience to begin with allows you to start recognizing, okay, what context do I need to give you? So why is it that I like games? For example, gaming gives me this ability to train my reflexes, and I feel that it's a very important thing because it makes me quick-witted. That changes the approach that people have about you and gaming. Whereas looking at you and gaming as, you're just wasting time, you're just killing time, it's like, no, it's different. It's the same reason as to how ladies can talk to guys about shopping in a very different manner from guys, right? Ladies that I know that love shopping, when you actually talk about it, who get really excited about shopping and the next product that they're checking out and everything, you start realizing that it changes their self-confidence. It changes the way they view respect to other people. Like, I dress up because I need to respect other people. Now that context completely changes the way that we look at people, right? Like the way I dress is respecting other people.
So I guess what you're saying is that instead of using jargon, we provide context.
All the time. We have to.
When we talk to people, or to at least explain the story behind what this term, or what this jargon means.
Yes.
Or this reference.
It's almost like, have you ever had those friends whenever your friends, when your friends start speaking Singlish, but your friend is not from Singapore, and then you have to explain what that word means? That is turning from jargon to layman.
Right. So it's basically understanding maybe in some ways the origin of the metaphor or the jargon, right? So one of the things that we often do is we use idioms in our language. So idioms are in some ways jargons, right? That someone says, I'm banking on it.
Yep, or I got stabbed in the back.
Yeah. So, I mean, stab in the back is quite literal, right? You know how...
I guess, but where's the knife?
Yeah, so metaphorically, where's the knife? Who's holding the knife?
Yeah.
How far did the knife go in?
Yeah, so and it changes like the conversation about this was also quite interesting because in India they wouldn't understand such terms, even though a lot of them speak English, because they don't use the colloquial terms that we use that is very Americanized.
Right. So well, we can say that jargons goes beyond just the technical terms in profession, but it goes even to our day-to-day language and idioms that we use, especially if we're talking to someone across cultures, which is very useful when we talk about remote working now, right? We're going to communicate with someone, could be in another country, another region altogether, and being aware of the idioms, even the metaphors that we use in our lives can really be jargon to someone else.
Yes, and this is when we go to the next point, right? Where we talk about creating stories. So one of my best ways, so I have been known to be the jargon-filled person of the year. Like, I used to be the kind of person who every time I speak, people go like, So I spent the last 2 years actually reversing that process. So as much as I could be relatable to anybody for the longest time, whenever I talked about psychological concepts or how I think about people.
Oh, yes.
You know that very well. So I'll go into jargon first, and then I'll go into create the stories for you to understand the fill-in blanks. But that's also because you can take it. There are people that I have to create stories from the start. I have to tell them my whole journey, what I think about the stories. For example, why do I have to repeat that I'm an ex-medical student that learned psychiatry? That sets the context. There's a bunch of assumptions already in there that, okay, here's my expertise, here's what I've experienced. 5 years of medical school, so I was actually this close to graduation. And that creates a certain context for the person to understand.
Yeah, and I think even when you say I was this close to graduation, also set certain assumptions in people's heads.
Yes. And because it's usually universal, usually because it might not work, but creating the storyline already sets a few contexts and a few boundaries for the person to work with.
Okay.
And because, yeah.
Can we have some tips on then how do we create stories?
It's number one, make it personal. You always have to make it your story. Like the story of why I started gaming. Why is gaming important to me? How did gaming change my life? These ways of creating stories already starts getting the person engaged in your world and your assumptions. So, actually game saved my life because if not for gaming, I think I would have gone into deeper depression. I wouldn't have met friends online. I wouldn't have met da 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 da. I would have done this. That sets the whole context as to why you love gaming. Would people understand your intention and your use of language a little bit more? Yes. Then when you start using jargons, for example, and you start saying, for example, my Dota friends, Dota, Defense of the Ancient, which is a very popular game. So that's another jargon, right? So Dota, right? It's a game that a lot of people like to use jargons on, where you need each character has their own name, and each name is almost like a jargon on its own. And so that language, if you actually explain the storyline of the person, which is why they have storylines of these people, and have the skill sets of these people, you actually explain to the other person why you like this character. It engages the person on your journey. And that's why
I'm going to practice the stating assumptions and providing background now, right? So for people who don't play Dota, it's a game whereby everyone has character heroes, where you're supposed to invade the other group's base and destroy the base. And there are different characters, different heroes in this game, all of which have their own special abilities and different races and characters and so on and so forth. So practicing the setting, background, and context, right? So that actually helps people who don't play Dota to understand what the game is and then understand what the jargons are about. So that we can tell stories by giving background, realizing that people may not have the personal experience. And I like what you said about making stories personal. Then another model, I love models, right? So another model that one could use for storytelling, if you were telling a story, is to use the hero's journey. I know that you're very familiar with it. So again, Google hero's journey, you will find a lot of materials on that. What else can we do to make stories?
So we go back to it.
Yeah.
So to make it stick, right? So what people relate to is, interestingly, emotions.
Right.
If I were to speak to you the whole way through and I told you about Dota in this kind of manner, with this kind of feeling, how would you feel? Would you feel like you can relate to my story?
I could definitely relate with your story.
So it's precisely that, right? It's about emoting your emotions. It's about getting emotions involved in the process. So if I talk about a game that I like and I sound like, oh yeah, I just like Dota a lot. You know, I like using it in a certain manner and I like how people talk and play the game. Versus, I spend quite a bit of time on Dota because I like the people I talk to and I get to meet people all across the world. And then when we're on the headsets, I get to have interactions that I've never had before. That excitement feeling brings that person on a journey with you. And then when you start talking about how gaming changed your life, it's like I was really depressed during that time. So using emotion words and imitating it and even saying it in a very honest manner, which also helps if you use full sentences, really changes the way the person experiences a story. And this allows the person to be more immersed in your story so that you have a better conversation with the person.
Okay, cool. So I think we've covered quite a bit of ground today. We start off to talk about jargon versus storytelling, communication with people. And first off, we started talking about, we really need to know your audience, the background and the context, so that you can communicate with them at a certain level. Be careful of using jargons with people who don't understand what those terms and jargons mean. Then we talked about how do we then translate from jargon to layman. I think it's connected to telling stories. We spoke about how to tell stories, some models we can use that, and also the importance of using emotions in telling stories. That's pretty much what we covered today.
Yep. It's a long version of that. Yes.
Okay, so we initially called this shorthand versus longhand, I think, around there. But really, we evolved it a little bit to talk about how we can communicate with people in a way that they understand it, and also being conscious of cultural background, context differences with people. So the next session we're going to talk about as part of this series of quality conversations is the usage of emojis and casual terms.
Yep, something that Alex is quite good with.
I like to use emojis and stickers. Okay, so Guys, thanks a lot. We'll see you at the next video. Bye.
Bye.